What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and it's Wednesday night, which means it's time to, curl up in bed, look through your team, send out some trades. So today we're going to be talking through, or I guess tonight, some trade targets. I believe we have 6 must-buy trade targets here. We're going to go through each and every single one, talk through some trade scenarios, and talk through why I like these guys as buys for Week 7 of the fantasy football season. Of course, if you enjoy, make sure to get down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Now, our first buy here is going to be Davante Adams. Now, we're going to get a little bit less luxury as we go on here, but people seem to be very fed up with Davante Adams. I did my top 10 lessons learned video on Monday. People were panicking about Davante Adams in the comment section, and I love it as a buy spot here because we have a lot of downward momentum, right? We have 2 dud weeks here where he hasn't looked very good. You have Jimmy Garoppolo potentially hurt, and the Raiders just aren't that sexy. You also have Jacoby Myers going crazy, and it's like, oh man, like why isn't Davante Adams doing good? And it's just like, just hang on, all right? It's Davante Adams. He's already had a game where he had 20 targets this year. He is going to be just fine in my eyes. I kind of looked together at Sumer Sports, PFF, Fantasy Points Data Suite, pulled together some stats on Davante Adams. Expected points per game, that is going to be based on your targets, your ADOT, your end zone targets, your red zone targets. How many points per game should you be putting up? He's the wide receiver 9 in expected points per game. In points per game, he's the wide receiver 13, so he's underperforming ever so slightly, but that's still great usage there. 4th in target share at 30%. He's one of, I believe, 4 wide receivers with 30% or better target share. 30% target per out runs on a per out basis. He's also at a 30% target share. First read target share percentage. So is he still the focal point of this offense? Yes. 43.4% of his targets are on the first read in this offense. Red zone target per out run. This one was interesting. I went to Sumer Sports has this stat where they sort of go through solely red zone receiving stats. You could see red zone target per out run, 38%. On a per-out basis, he is commanding the ball 38% in the red zone. Red zone receptions, he has 8 right now, and I believe just only 2 touchdowns in the red zone. I could be wrong, but I believe he only has 2 touchdowns for, inside of the red zone. I think he has 3 total right now. And then if we look, his expected receiving touchdowns on PFF, so, based on his red zone targets, all of that, he should have 4. He's only at 2. He's underperforming in the touchdown department, but he's very much a focal point in that part of the field. We also have, Jimmy Garoppolo might not be playing, and that's kind of like a bad thing for him, sure. But we also have a 1-game sample of him without Jimmy Garoppolo, and he had 13 targets in that game with Aiden O'Connell and was just fine. So I'm not panicking after 2 down weeks here. We talked about Jacoby Myers last week. This is a great offense to want pieces of. We can see here up at the top, this is a Sam Hoppen graphic. Sam Hoppen is amazing. You can see bottom right corner. That's his ad on Twitter. And up there, in the 3rd spot, you have the Raiders with Davante Adams. This is also since week 3, so it actually takes out the first 2 weeks when Davante Adams, the beginning of the year, he was a little bit better than he is now. And even still, just shy of 30% target share. He's up there. It's a very concentrated offense, this Raiders team, and that's really good for fantasy football because it just means that the balls are going to the good players, and that is very important. So it's not like it's not like targets are going away from Davante Adams. There's anything to be worried about. You also have, he dealt with an AC sprain or AC joint sprain in his shoulder. It's a minor injury that you can play through, but we are now, I believe that was in week 4. So now we're 2 weeks removed from that going into the 3rd week. He should be all the way good to go, healthy. You have Jimmy Garoppolo, who is pretty much a 50-50 to play this game. If Jimmy Garoppolo plays, that's great. If not, Brian Hoyer seems to be the next guy up, and Brian Hoyer actually looked really good in that game against the Patriots. They have the Bears here. The Bears are allowing 29.3 points per game to their opponents, the 3rd most in the NFL. So, again, Davante Adams is a very clear, top 8 wide receiver rest of season for me. I'm not all that concerned on him, so I believe that he's a buy. Now, when we talk about him as a buy, I don't just want to sort of throw it out there as, just go out there and buy Davante Adams. Recently, we've been going on to fantasycalc.com. It is a nice little trade database they have here where you can see the site, fantasycalc.com. And you can see we generate trade values, insights, whatever, from hundreds of thousands of real trades. They're constantly scraping new trades from multiple fantasy sites. Now, these aren't all perfect, right? Some of these are going to be a little bit wonky, but it is the best that we have, and I can kind of point out the ones that seem a little bit more reasonable and give you guys some suggestions on how I would go about trading for Davante Adams. So they have a trade database. You can search over 1 million real fantasy football trades here. We have 2 to 3 assets in the trade just to make it 2 for 1 or 1 for 1 just to keep it simple. 1 QB, 12 teams, half PPR, full PPR. Now we look through here. Kenneth Walker for Davante Adams straight up is interesting. I probably wouldn't, but I don't mind the idea of Kenneth Walker for Davante Adams and a running back, but probably not Javonte. If this was like Gibbs or something, I don't know that that's completely out of the question. I would actually do that. Moving on down the list here, we do have a Derrick Henry deal I was looking at. Yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry and any kind of, little piece on top. Derrick Henry and Marvin Mims on top to go get Davante Adams. I do love that all day long. I saw like Garrett Wilson. Yeah, Garrett Wilson and George Pickens. I mean, please, I would do that all day. Chris Olave and any kind of plus on top in this Rachaad White, Alexander Madison, anything in that area. Brian Robinson on top of Chris Olave to get Davante Adams. I would do that all day long. CeeDee Lamb for Davante Adams is interesting. I think that's about a wash, to be honest with you. I don't know that this is available. Actually, Nico Collins and a plus, I think, could get you to Davante Adams. So if you can do Nico Collins and a plus, like Garrett Wilson, Chris Godwin, and Garrett Wilson and Chris Godwin aren't even necessarily sells, but I'm just trying to think of like reasonable pluses to get to Davante Adams. I also like this James Cook and Calvin Ridley one. If you can take James Cook, add a plus, and get to Davante Adams, please go do that. So he's really not all that expensive right now. Now, moving on from him, we have Marquise Brown as our next buy. Now, this one is really similar to what we had with Jacoby Myers last week, where he's just not sexy, right? He's just a wide receiver 2. Nobody really wants him. Not that nobody really wants him, and nobody's going to pay top dollar for your Marquise Brown, but I think right now is a good time to buy, where the Cardinals are sort of falling apart a little bit, and this was the first time that Marquise Brown has scored under 16 PPR points since week 1, which is pretty crazy. He's been over 16 PPR points from weeks 2 through 5. This week, he was not, but he also had the most targets he's had in this entire season with 11. He had 11 targets, the most of his entire season, despite having his first game under 16 PPR points, and he had a little bit of a dud here, but he's still getting a ton of volume. When we talk about expected points per game on PFF, again, targets, ADOT, red zone targets, all of that. I mean, he's a fringe wide receiver 1 in terms of volume, where he's at 16.6 expected points per game. Honestly, similar story to what you have with Garrett Wilson, where Garrett Wilson's around 16 expected points per game, but more in that 13 to 14 actual points per game. Now, this is where it gets interesting. First, he gets Seattle this week, who's allowing the second most fantasy points to wide receivers. He gets a nice little bounce back spot. And then on top of that, you have the Cardinals, who, without James Conner, likely have to pass more, leaning into the pass. And then you also have Kyler Murray, who's on his way to the team. So you have a lot of outs to this bet, and I really want to bet on Marquise Brown. And Kyler Murray, coming off the ACL, probably won't scramble as much, and he's going to be forced to be a pocket passer. Now, I don't think it's that crazy to say that he's a better pocket passer than Josh Dobbs, even if it's not completely Kyler Murray's play style. And without James Conner, they might really lean on the pass. And that's where things get exciting, where if they lean on the pass and Kyler Murray is even like 85%, 90% of his former self, then we're really cooking with some gas on Marquise Brown, and he could be like a top 15 guy from weeks, let's say like 9 to 10 on, because we have this report here. Kyler Murray, he's returning to practice. They opened the IR, or the 21-day practice window. He returned to practice. They're expected that he's not going to debut until week 8 at the earliest, which is fine. That's an out later down the line where maybe he comes in week 10 or something like that, and he just is an absolute stud down the stretch. So there's a lot of like sort of upside, sort of entrapped or hidden in Marquise Brown. Now, when we look at what he's trading for on Fantasy Calc here, you can get him for pretty reasonable prices here, man. People are just sort of shipping him off. I don't mind George Pickens for Marquise Brown, where George Pickens, now Deontay Johnson is back. That offense has kind of been a dumpster fire. But even that, you can get him for cheaper, man. I mean, Rachaad White for Marquise Brown straight up, yes. Brian Robinson for Marquise Brown. Even if you don't get a piece, I would do Brian Robinson for Marquise Brown pretty easily. What else sticks out? Oh, yeah, there was like a Jahan Dotson or any, not even Cole Kmet, but any kind of plus. I don't know. Could you do Jahan Dotson and Pat Freiermuth for Marquise Brown? I'm not sure. Someone who's maybe hurting at tight end, you could slip in a Kmet, a Logan Thomas, anything in that tier. What else here? I also have, Nico Collins, Marquise Brown is actually very close. I would probably call that one a wash. I don't mind the idea of, now I don't like Devontae Smith for Marquise Brown straight up, but if you could do Devontae Smith for Marquise Brown and a piece on top, like if you could do Devontae Smith for Marquise Brown, I'm trying to think of like who would be like a low-key piece to put on top of that. Who did we just talk about? Davante Adams? No. If you could do Devontae Smith for Marquise Brown and like Tee Higgins, I wouldn't mind it. If you could do Devontae Smith for Marquise Brown, I don't think you could do Pacheco. I'm trying to think of like a running back that I'm actually interested in, that like isn't pushed up too much right now. I wouldn't mind. I mean, you're not going to get anything too crazy. I wonder how cheap you can get Gibbs for right now. Yeah, I don't know. If you could do Pacheco, I'd be interested in it. It's tough to buy running backs right now, I will say. Now, after that, our next buy here is going to be, I'm just kind of looking through other running backs here, but there's nothing that really sticks out. Aaron Jones would be a good one, but I think that he might be a little bit too expensive for that kind of deal. Yeah, anything among those lines I think works just fine. All right, so moving on to the next one, we have Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, a little bit of a luxury buy here. Took me a second to sort of figure out what the heck was going on here. But we have Christian McCaffrey as I believe this is going to be our third buy here. And I know that this one's like super luxury and it's like, Ron, like, what do you mean go trade for Christian McCaffrey? But just do your due diligence. I think at the very least you should do your due diligence, hit up the McCaffrey owner, see what you can kind of get cooking up here. Because it's pretty straightforward when it comes to McCaffrey. Okay, this is a video from the offseason, me in the offseason, where all offseason we spent hunting down the next legendary running back. And the whole idea of legendary running backs, as you can see here on the bottom left in that chart, is that 20-plus point per game seasons, wide receivers and running backs are about even since 2018. Where running backs blow wide receivers out of the water is at 22.5-plus points per game. And we haven't had a 22.5-plus point per game running back since 2020 with Alvin Kamara. So that running back who sets himself apart and destroys the wide receivers in a given season hasn't presented itself in 2+ years. We now have a season where Christian McCaffrey, as of right now, has 24.7 points per game. That's including a game against the Browns this week where he left early. And he has the inside track on the first legendary running back season since 2020. And that is very, very exciting. Now, since about like week 2 or 3, if you just polled the general public, they would say, Christian McCaffrey, if we did a redraft right now, he would be the consensus 101 by a mile. Until now. Now there's a little bit of pause. Maybe it's Tyreek Hill. Maybe it's somebody else because Christian McCaffrey is banged up. And I think that is just like a little bit, I'm not saying that you're going to get a massive discount, but it's enough wiggle room where he goes from untouchable to someone you could maybe send out a trade for and see what you can do. Again, Christian McCaffrey has an oblique injury. It doesn't really seem to be all that serious. He's a chance to play this week, but it's just enough uncertainty and enough doubt that maybe you can pluck him off of somebody. Now, when we look at what he's been trading for, what I would sort of recommend is if you have, I wouldn't do Cooper Kupp, but if you have a Derrick Henry or any of these sort of running backs that you sort of feel you might want to move off of, like a Saquon Barkley as well. I think Raheem Mostert's a good one as well that we'll kind of look at, but you can see you can add. Now, Pollard and Ridley is steep. But I think I would still, if I was good at wide receiver, I think I would do that. Raheem Mostert plus, if I could do Raheem Mostert plus a Mike Evans, I would do that all day long. You can see like he's actually sort of getting moved here. Tony Pollard and Mike Evans. It feels steep, but I think I would. Calvin Ridley and Saquon, like a Saquon plus. Again, if I can do Kenneth Walker plus, where it's Kenneth Walker and Pittman. If I can do JT plus, where it's Calvin Ridley and JT. Like if you have a running back that is viewed as a running back one, and you have another piece that you're willing to move off of that's pretty high end, Garrett Wilson ETN is close, man. Garrett Wilson ETN is close. Like I'm saying, look, we're not going dumpster diving here, but if you can, take your Raheem Mostert, Ayuk, that is expensive, but I think I would. Raheem Mostert and Ayuk, I think I would do that, man. DeAndre Swift and Raheem Mostert, that's close as well, but I think I would do that. If you can take your Raheem Mostert, add to it, and get McCaffrey, I would. And Raheem Mostert to me is not even necessarily a must sell, and neither is like Saquon or ETN or any of these guys. But again, if you have a RB1 that you can bridge the gap with, I think you should. I think you should try. Again, you'll probably fail. Most good players will just be like, no, I'm not moving McCaffrey. But again, if there was ever a time for a little bit of wiggle room, I think it would be right now. Now, moving on to our next buy here, we have Tee Higgins. Now, Tee Higgins is pretty straightforward. He's kind of been out of sight, out of mind. He's been hurt with his rib injury. He has a bye week this week. He hasn't produced over 5+ PPR points since week 2. He had a dud week 6 where he came out there and was a decoy with his rib injury. Just 56% of the routes here you can see he did nothing. He hasn't scored over 5 PPR points since week 2 when he had 29 points. But the offense is clicking. He gets a bye week this week. He's going to come back fully healthy, and we should expect like weeks 1 through 3 usage of 90% plus of the routes, 20% plus target share. in a good offense where he's a really nice wide receiver too. And I think you can buy him for as cheap as you're ever going to be able to buy Tee Higgins until after the bye week. And he just absolutely, I mean, not crushes, but he's going to be fine in terms of just like what you expected him to be based on where you drafted him. Now, what you can buy Tee Higgins for, I mean, you can get him dirt cheap, man. I think there's some places out there where some guys, I'm telling you as well, if you can leverage it a little bit where you look and the guy who was Tee Higgins is like 1-5 or 2-4, and he doesn't have time to wait for Tee Higgins on the bye week, I think that's when you swoop in and you see what you can do, man. I'm telling you, I do think that you can kind of finesse a little bit here. I know it's not going to be as easy, but there's some traits here that it's like, man, I mean, Javonte for T straight up, yes. What else sticks out? Lockett for Tee Higgins straight up, yes. Michael Thomas for Tee Higgins straight up, yes. Terry McLaurin for Tee Higgins straight up, yes. Curtis Samuel for Tee Higgins straight up, yes. Najee for Tee Higgins, yes. I mean, Zach Moss for Tee Higgins is crazy, but there might be someone that down bad. I think that's a yes for me. Dameon Pierce for Tee Higgins straight up, I think so, but that doesn't really fit the narrative because Dameon Pierce has a bye. Deontay Johnson for Tee Higgins straight up, yes. Jerry Jeudy and Peace for Tee Higgins straight up, yes. Rashad White for Tee Higgins, yes. James Cook for Tee Higgins is close, but I think still I would take Tee Higgins there. So you can see, like, you can sort of pluck and prod, especially if that Tee Higgins owner is not doing too hot in your league. Now, we have 2 buys left. Our 5th buy for today is going to be Tank Dell. Tank Dell, he is somebody that's sort of similar to Tee Higgins, where he's out of sight, out of mind. He hasn't played a full game, I believe, since like week 4. But if you look at his per route stuff, where he's going to be the 4th name down, Tank Dell, right? Week 4 pass snap percentage was 81%, and then from there he's sort of fallen off. This is the rookie wide receiver report, but he's been one of the best rookie wide receivers, where he's almost like right next to Zay Flowers, where him and Zay Flowers right around 20% target per out run. Tank Dell is actually much more efficient on yards per out run, and he has a better PFF receiving grade. So Zay Flowers is someone who's getting valued as like a borderline wide receiver too, and it seems like Tank Dell is almost free. This was somebody that was red hot before his concussion in week 5, was the wide receiver 23 through the 4 weeks, the first 4 weeks. So I don't mind kind of betting on him to come out of the bye. He should get cleared from the concussion protocol, and I'm fine betting on any piece in that CJ Stroud passing offense. It's been electric so far. He should be just fine. Now, he is going as well for dirt cheap. Like, you can really, I mean, like, he's going for pretty much, almost nothing. I mean, Chuba Hubbard for Tank Dell is interesting if you don't need a running back. Man, I don't mind Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel for Tank Dell and Zach Evans is actually sort of fun there. I would do Dotson straight up for Tank Dell if that was on the table. If I didn't need a tight end, I would do Musgrave for Tank Dell. I would do Dobbs for Tank Dell. Again, Jahan Dotson for Tank Dell. I mean, if you get a piece there, I doubt it. I mean, Kareem Hunt for him, sure. If there's a Zach Moss one for him, sure. I could have sworn I saw Zach Moss. Yeah, Zach Moss. I mean, you're not gonna get the Hopkins part of it, but like Hopkins or Zach Moss straight up for Tank Dell all day long. And I also saw like a Khalil Herbert one. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why anyone would want Khalil Herbert, but Khalil Herbert for Tank Dell. I mean, yes. Like, a lot of these are almost like throwaways, where he's like almost a borderline drop guy. Tyjae Spears with Tank Dell. I think I would do that as well. Now, moving on, we have our last buy trade target here. And it's someone we talked about last week, and I saved it till the end because I think you guys are going to be, 1, annoyed that I keep talking about him, and 2, he is a little bit more on the luxury side. And it's not like every league, Bijan Robinson's not going to be all that attainable. But I do think he is one of the best buys out there right now. I know that he was last week, but I think that he is here again, where this is somebody where he's a rookie. We are betting on him to be a stud down the stretch. We are just 6 weeks in. And 6 weeks into the season, he is yet to finish outside the top 24 RBs and PPR points in a given week, and that is in a RB landscape where running backs are really struggling. I'm going to my face in the top right corner real quick, if I can figure that out on the fly here, which I definitely can. Yeah, so we're going to put ourselves right here. Why not? Just so you guys can see me. But 48% rush attempt share, that's a little bit low, but that's because he had under 3 yards per carry. Now, that's against a really good Washington front. And on top of that, I mean, he's been a good rusher this year. He's 6th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 4th in rushing yards over expected per attempt, and the receiving usage is amazing, right? He had 100% of the 2-minute drill snaps, 94% of the long down and distance. I know people are concerned about the inside the 5 attempts, but you can see with Tyler Algier on the bottom here, I mean, he had 100% in week 6, and he had 100% in week 1, but in between there, like, there just hasn't been a ton of inside the 5 opportunities for either of these guys, right? Like, Bijan had 100% in week 2, and then Algier had 100% in week 6 and in week 1. Like, that's 2-to-1 ratio there. On top of that, short down and distance stuff, which is your short yardage, which is pretty much indicative of your goal line, 86% in week 6. It's just neither of these guys could really get going in the run game, so I'm not all that concerned. And again, in the passing game, there's a lot to be excited about. He's second in route participation this year. He's second in targets. He's first in receptions among running backs. He has 0 rushing touchdowns. And again, the goal line has been an issue, but Tyler Algier only has 2 rushing touchdowns himself. So it's not like there's this Jamal Williams-esque vulture out there. It's just not what it's been. They just haven't had many goal line opportunities in general on this team. Now, I think, again, it takes a little bit of time for things to click for rookie running backs or rookies in general. And with Bijan, I think you just sort of have to trust that he is a good player. And I think better game scripts for the running backs are going to come here. Where if we look at just sort of what the game scripts have been here, I talked about this on the Top 10 Lessons Learned video, where we can look here. Their neutral pass rate is 30th, and their pass rate expectation is 32nd, yet they are tied for 16th in pass attempts per game. That is because they consistently trail, where this is a great stat from Rich Rebrar, where you can see the Falcons have now led for just 12.7% of their offensive snaps, ahead of only the Jets and the Giants. They're not leading a ton, even though this is a team with like a good defense, and Arthur Smith is, as much as he doesn't use Kyle Pitts, he's a good coach. They're going to win games. They've been, they're going to be in the mix for the NFC South. I don't think that this is going to hold up. They're not a bottom 3 team in the NFL. So again, pass rate expectation, 32nd in the NFL, but they're passing the ball tied for the 16th most in the NFL. That should go all the way down to like bottom 10. There should be more rush attempts for Bijan Robinson. There should be more goal line attempts. On top of that, you get a really, really nice playoff schedule here where he is going to be playing against Carolina, the Colts, the Bears, allowing the 2nd, 11th, and 4th most fantasy points to running backs. So I'm telling you, down the stretch, I think Bijan Robinson is really going to be a problem. And in a world right now where there are no good fantasy running backs outside of like the top 5, if the Bijan owner is fed up, go make an offer. Because again, running backs suck right now. And Bijan Robinson is yet to let you down in a single week. He has been an RB2 at absolute worst in a given week. Now, some of these are going to be ridiculous, right? I mean, Kyron Williams for Bijan, of course, even as much as I love Breece Hall, I would do Breece Hall for Bijan Robinson. Pacheco and a piece for Bijan Robinson, that's pretty easy. Metcalf and Ridley for Bijan, pretty easy. I would do CeeDee Lamb for Bijan straight up. James Cook and Evans. Like, I would take almost everything here. Achane for Bijan, I would. Rachaad White and Nico Collins, I would. What else did I see when I looked through these earlier? It seems like Bijan... Yeah, James Cook and Mike Evans, I would do that pretty easily. Again, Achane and a piece, sure. Rachaad White and Nico Collins for Bijan Robinson, sure. I think you could do potentially Raheem Mostert for Bijan plus. I don't know, but I would, if I could sell Raheem Mostert for Bijan, a deal like that, I 100% would. Chris Olave and James Cook for Bijan, yes. Again, all of these. DeAndre Swift and Terry McLaurin for Bijan Robinson, yes. Like, he is still going to be a top 5 running back rest of the season for me. I'm going to do my rest of season rankings here in a second. Literally, as soon as this video goes live, I'm going to hop off of here and do my rest of season rankings, which you can find on the Patreon. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I do my rest of season rankings every single week on there. You get my weekly rankings, my weekly Fab Advice article, all of that good stuff on the Patreon. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It's sort of an abrupt end here, but that is going to be our 6 must-buy trade targets for Week 7 of the fantasy football season. As always, if you enjoyed, make sure you get down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm